James Farr, live from Pasadena Media Studios. Get ready for more piercing and provocative. The Conversation Live starts now. And welcome to another episode of The Conversation Live. The Conversation Live focuses on social justice, restorative justice, inclusion, and equality. Coming up today, Brandon Lamar is in the seat. We're going to unpack his campaign for Pasadena City Council District 3. But first, we'll check in with our underwriters, and we'll join Brandon on the other side of this break. And welcome back, and thanks to our friends over at Pasadena City College for their generous support of the Conversation Live. So Brandon Lamar is in the seat today. Brandon, how you doing today, brother?
I'm blessed, man. So good to be here. Good to be with you, man. Yeah, just blessed to be alive.
All right, brother. So you're getting ready, or you're actually already in motion. You've announced your candidacy for District 3.
Yeah.
Pasadena City Council. So we got a lot to cover in this next 27 minutes, so there's going to be plenty of time for you to unpack your campaign, things that are important to you. In fairness, I did reach out to your opponent, Justin Jones, who was also the incumbent and was appointed by the City Council, but unfortunately, he has not returned a call and accepted an invitation. And in fact, I have not spoken with Mr. Jones since he was sworn in last year. So thank you so much for sitting down with us. You know, I'm gonna get straight to it with the policing issues. That's what people watch, many of the reasons why people watch Conversation Live. Is our police department doing a good job? And can they be doing better?
So here's my answer. I think that I've worked in LAPD 4 years as a civilian programs director. I've worked with law enforcement agencies. I've worked with law enforcement officers across the board. As seeing that, I believe, and this is my honest opinion, I've said it publicly and privately, that I believe that Pasadena does have one of the best police departments in our country that I've seen. I've seen juvenile detention centers and some other things. Now, even though we have one of the best departments, I believe that Pasadena Police Department has a lot of work to do. And we have a lot of work to do to bring trust back into our community. There's a lot of traumatic issues that is happening within the community, especially District 3, especially Northwest Pasadena, that has not been dealt with, right? And we continue to see them happen over and over again. And you know, you get apology after the fact, but even though you get apology or you get a couple of $1 million from a lawsuit afterwards, it doesn't heal the community, right? The person is still gone, life is still lost, traumatic issues are still happening in our community. That's one segment. But the other segment is there's a divide in our police department, as everyone knows right now. And this is something that, you know, you don't have to read the newsletters to see. We see it across the board, right? There's a divide in our police department, and we have to bring accountability back into our police department.
So Brandon, we were talking about policing, and we look at the budget increase. You know, departments consistently ask for more money. This past fiscal year, they got a 5% increase, so they're at about $105 million. You were talking about that. Often we see divides, right, between policing and the community. Are we getting what we're paying for? I guess is the question that I'm getting to from what we as residents and taxpayers put out in terms of a budget. Are we getting what we pay for?
Yeah, so before I say that, just let me say that, you know, I said number one, that there's a divide between community and police, law enforcement, and community engagement. But there's also a divide between our law enforcement within the house, right? And I think we have to fix the house before we can actually start seeing improvements within the community as well. Because a house divided within itself, right? And so that's something that we have to fix. Second thing is that you brought up is the police budget. Now, I think the question is, what are our expectations? Because if you look at it, we're getting what we paid for, right? We have, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, we have about 4 to 5 helicopters. We have one of the best police departments when it comes to equipment, when it comes to modern day equipment, when it comes to vehicles, when it comes to arms and everything else. So you're getting what you paid for, and I think that's what it is. I think we need more accountability for what we're getting paid for, right? And of course, with the $100 million increase that our police department got, of course it goes to salaries and goes to retirement and things of that nature as well. And so I think to answer your question, we are getting what we pay for, but I think, are we getting the services that the community is requiring? And I think that's the question that we have to answer. And is our community actually holding our police department accountable? And is our city council holding our police department accountable? And are we literally sharing our expectations of what our police department is for and what we want them to do? That's the reason why we were fighting so hard to get our Civilian Police Oversight Commission. But we got to get that commission some more teeth so that they can actually do what the community has asked them to do.
I want to clarify. It wasn't a $100 million increase. It was a 5% increase,
Right.
which took us to 105
Right.
million. I don't want people to think that they got an additional
Right.
100 million, but certainly over the next 20 years, they would be on track to get
Right.
another additional 100.
I mean, let's talk about Los Angeles that got $1 billion for
Right.
within the next 4 years.
Right,
So,
right. So looking at District 2 specifically, because you ran against a juggernaut, John J. Kennedy, right, who had deep ties in the community, our late friend John J. Kennedy, right, who recently transitioned just last year.
Right.
And the two of you were in a very, in some respects close, race, right? What did you learn from that experience?
That's a great question, and I'll tell you this, that you're the first person who actually asked me that openly. First thing is I've learned humility and respect. I've also learned that everything you see in public is not what goes on behind closed doors. And so what I really learned from John and from what he's done in District 3 is that there's a lot of things that he had to fight for in order for it to happen in District 3, whether it be the upgrades to Robinson Park, whether it be the upgrades to the pool, Robinson Pool, whether it be now we have literally 3 to 4 and more continuing units that have already been built for affordable housing, low income housing, senior housing. And most of those, if not all of them, have been in District 3. And those are the things that he has fought for. And a lot of the work that he continued to do and a lot of the pushback that he had, I didn't see until I actually ran against him and started having conversations with him. And so I tell everybody, I don't take back not one thing from the experience, because I believe, and this is my true belief, that me and John ran our campaigns, both of our campaigns, with respect and dignity, and we focused on the issues. We didn't bash each other. Which means that, we can go back out and do this again, which is the reason why I'm doing it and chose to do it again. Because the first time the district chose who they wanted. They picked John. Mm-hmm. And, he became my mentor after that. We had plenty of conversations within that. He's the reason why I have some of the connections that I have now, and that was before his death, right? And so I really respect that man for the way that he has engaged with me during this process, and even after the process, after he's been gone. The reason why I jumped back into the race is because I don't believe that the appointment process was fair and just.
How so? What do you mean?
Good question. Thank you for asking. For the most part is, I think that our community, preferably government, our departments, have always asked our community, what do we want to see? What do we want? How do we want it? What is it going to take for us to get it? And when the community gives answers, it seems as if And the record has shown that most time our city council, city departments does the opposite of what the community says. With having over 300 signatures, verified signatures of district residents, with having over 90 letters of district residents, with having the only support phone calls of the night for appointment process, they decided to go with somebody else. And so I think those are the things that are part of our injustice and a part of the reasons why there's so many stigmas that has been connected to District 3 for so long. And we have to stop those stigmas, and we have to continue to make sure that the people's voices are actually heard on city council, and there's no special interest behind this thing. As I tell everybody, I'm a coalition builder. I build communities, I build neighborhoods, I build organizations, and we bring all of those things together to make sure that we get the Pasadena that we really want to see, not only for the now generation, but for the generations behind us, so that when my children, whenever I have them, they can actually be able to call this place home as well. So that's the important thing for me. And I think that's a part of John's legacy as well. And so, something that we definitely have to change is making sure that if this case, or if something happens where a person's not able to lead anymore, then we will have a special election for that seat instead of having to go to the city council.
What do you say to those who say, well, Brandon's just entitled. He should have been it because he was the second loser, right? That's real talk. What do you say to those people?
Yeah, first, number one, I wasn't the second loser, I was the first loser. It was only me and John, so I was the first loser, I was the only loser. But, people can say entitled. I believe I'm the farthest from entitled. My record shows I've been doing the work. And I think that's the biggest thing that people have to understand. It's not the accolades, it's not the degrees, it's not where you live, it's not the class that you are in, it's not the money that you make. It's, have you done the work, and are there results that back behind it? Not speaking of the 4 organizations that I'm a part of, that I'm actually on the board for, not speaking of the organizations that I actually started myself, not speaking of the coalition building that I've done in Pasadena, not speaking of the integration of boards that I've helped to make minority and to uplift the minority voices, and to create more advocates in our city and more activists in our city. So I believe, me personally, if I'm speaking about myself, my work has spoken for me, and it's spoken for me before I actually decided to run for council.
Let's talk about some of that work, because you were on the Human Relations Commission. Currently, you're vice chair of the Pasadena Housing Board. How has that work? And the Housing Board kind of came in between the election, right? You were previously, I believe, the chair of the Human Relations Commission. So how has that work informed you, and how do you see you taking that with you into, if the voters choose you come next year? Yeah,
so when the voters choose me, I think there's a couple of things that I will highlight from that, right? As chair of the Human Relations Commission, a couple of things that we have done is really bring and hone in on hate crime and hate incidents in our community, and making sure that our community, whether you are Jewish, whether you are Asian, because Asians and African Americans was one of the top people who are discriminated against during the George Floyd and COVID incidences, right? And so we actually rose those resources to our community for them to actually be able to be safe while reporting hate incidences and hate crimes, right? We also created a resolution for our city to actually go in and rectify the work of Han and former mayor A.I. Stewart from working together on redlining in our community. And we actually are telling the community that this is not right, right? We also went in and changed the language for the Mills Place plaque so that the community can know what actually happened when white individuals burned down a Chinese settler laundromat in our city. The thing that's so crazy to me about Pasadena, even though we're a great, diverse city, we always apologize after, right? But we never do anything to prevent these situations from happening. So those are some of the things that we've done under my watch and leadership in the Human Relations Commission. Can I say that about anybody else? Probably. But that's stuff that we've done within the last 2 to 3 years that has brought solutions, right? Now we have the Rental Housing Board. And I know people, they have their own motive and suggestions of the Rental Housing Board, but it's taken us time to get that up and off the ground because we're literally creating a brand new department within our city. And one of the stigmas from the Rental Housing Board that I would just like to say is that the Rental Housing Board is not just a voice for tenants, but the Rental Housing Board is a voice for tenants and for landlords and for property owners. And the truth of the matter is we just want to make sure that people in Pasadena can afford to live here and they don't have to move away. One of the biggest things that I hear when I knock on neighbors' doors is that, yes, we have our home, but we're concerned that our children and our grandchildren can't afford to live here, so they have to move to other states and other counties. That's a concern for me. It's a concern for me because it's hit my own household. Out of 10 children that my grandmother has had, out of 39 grandchildren that she has, out of 24 great-grandchildren, I'm the only one left in Pasadena, and we all were born in Pasadena. And I'm the only one left.
Well,
It's an issue.
The city now is just about 60% renters, right? All of our council members, well, let's just say none of them are renters, right? Like, so why is it important that voice and that perspective? Like, some may say you're the boogeyman. Like, we don't want a renter on the city council. Why is it important to have that voice on that dais on Garfield?
I think it's important because it's all about perspective, right? Like one of the biggest things we hear on our rental board is that you don't have any landlords on your rental board, which we have two, but we hear all the time you don't have any landlords, so nobody's able to speak for us, right? And that's the same thing that people feel about our city council. There's no renters on our city council, so you won't be able to hear the perspective of 64% of the population of your city, right? And I think that's what it's all about. It's all about perspective. It's all about having people, if we call ourselves diverse and an inclusive city, then we have to make sure that it is diverse and inclusive in every single way. And the voices of the community has to be heard, especially the majority of the such, right? And so if renters are the majority, then you have to have that perspective on council, right? Not saying that that's the only perspective, but the perspective has to be there as well.
As you're out there canvassing and you're talking with your constituents, neighbors, folks in District 3, are you seeing, because we look at, I can recall when I was doing some mentoring work where kids would just disappear out of the schools, right? Mm-hmm. Like you'd see them one week, the next week they're gone. Are you seeing this kind of exodus, if you will, folks that maybe when you were out campaigning during the last cycle, you shaking hands and met folks and even had a glass of lemonade? Are those folks, some of those folks, are they still there? Are they moving? What are you seeing out there when you're out there talking to people?
I would say that a lot of people that I met last year, and we knocked on every single door twice. So a lot of people that we met last year, some of them, a lot of them are still there, but we do have a good amount of people, nice percentage of people that no longer live in Pasadena. Some of those people have reached out to me personally and say, hey, we don't no longer live here, but best of luck. And other ones I have to find out by knocking on their door, knowing that they don't live there anymore. But we've seen that come down through generations. And so I think now is the perfect time for us to put a halt at that. Because I think, it's one thing for people to want to move, and they have better choices and they can actually afford to buy a house somewhere else. That's one thing. But for people to be forced out because they can no longer afford it, that's a whole nother thing. And I think we have to do something about that.
Let's talk about your candidacy now, your campaign, your top priorities.
My top 3 priorities is number 1, affordable housing. And we just talked about all of that recently, right? Next one is public safety. Mm-hmm. Public safety, when I ran against John last year, we had over 60-something shootings that happened within a 9-month span, right? We're in the 9th month right now, and Pasadena has had over 40-something shootings so far. So it looks like we're going to be in that same number. There has to be something done about that, right? If we're talking about affordable housing, we cannot talk about affordable housing and community, and making sure that people are able to live here, and not only just live here, but buy here as well.
Let's drill down on that, because I think that's worth a pause, right? The affordable housing. What is the role of the city council? Like, what can you do, right? To help folks who are looking to, as you said, this generational displacement that's happening. What's the council's role in all of that?
I think the council role is to look at both sides and look at every entity of our city to see where we can build. Not only that, where we can build, but where we can actually go in and rebuild some things. What COVID showed us is that there was a mass exodus of buildings of people that stopped using buildings for their businesses. And we have some empty buildings around Pasadena. I think the first thing that we have to do is start changing our zoning to make sure that we're able to build more affordable housing units where these places where we're not using anymore. They're unused buildings, and we see it every day we drive by. And so instead of a big corporation coming in to buy that, I think our city can work with developers, not only just developers, but state and federal funding opportunities so that we can buy affordable housing in those units and around our city. I think also something that we can do is we see institutions that you'll hear more of in the coming months that are starting to sell their properties because they're not of use to them anymore. I think the city has to start going into negotiations with these institutions to making sure that these institutions in some way, form, or fashion push affordable housing to be built on those lands. So I think first thing our city has to do is start those conversations and making sure, and I think that we have the land to do it. We just have to do the work. We have to have those conversations.
710 stub, and all of the displacement that took place in the, I guess we can call it southwestern part of the city, right? And now we know community as being northwest, but we look at the 710 stub. You have any thoughts on how that process should go and what that reconciliation? I almost want to use the other R word, reparations, but I know that may not fly well in this city. But any thought on that? John was a big proponent for that. He championed the not one Colorado, but 110 Walnut property, the largest development to date, right, in the city, and the 710 will dwarf that, right, once it's finally up and going. What are your thoughts on how that 710, how that should be, if you will, restored back to community? Right.
So I think we have a nice diverse group in our 710 working group that the city has established. I think they're very diverse and well informed. But my personal opinion is I'm going to let them do their work and do the research, and we'll find out what comes from that. I do believe that we have to focus a lot more on home ownership. It's one thing for us to continue to build affordable housing, which is great, right? But we have to also help to create more homeowners in our city. I think that's a great opportunity within that corridor to help us create more homeowners in our community, especially more minority homeowners, because let's be very clear, it was the minority community that was displaced from the 710 corridor. And so I think that would be a great opportunity to have and create an opportunity for more minority home ownership in our city. And we can talk about the green spaces. We can talk about public transportation that will go into that. But I think that we have a wrong to rectify, and we can make a right out of this. And I think we have to have the right voices around the table in order to make that right.
How will you make our government and more accessible, I guess is the word that I'm looking for, to folks who aren't necessarily as informed? It's not always as easy for folks to sit and watch a 4-hour council meeting because they have life, right? Life happens, and you typically get folks who come to council reactionary, right? What's your plan to make it more inclusive for your potential constituents?
First off, on a personal level, one thing I've done, and I make sure it's publicized, and I get a lot of questions, especially from family, of why I've done it, but my phone number is everywhere. My personal phone number is everywhere. It's on my website. It's on my social media. It's on the city's website with my paperwork and everything else. It's everywhere. And so first thing is being accessible to my constituents, letting them know that I'm here, that I hear you. But it's not only, I think it's one thing to hear them, but it's another thing to make action behind what you hear. And so I think I have a history of action points and making action, turning conversations into action steps, and we've seen it across the board. And so that's one of the things that I'm learning and continuing and will continue to do, is making sure that my constituents, whether you live in Northwest Pasadena, whether you live in the Playhouse District, or whether you are a business in the district, that everyone's voice will be heard and their concerns will be heard, and we will find solutions to this. I just told somebody this today: I don't make promises. I never make a promise, but what I'll do, I will work hard in making sure that we try to find solutions to your problems. And I think that's what we have to go in. And I think that's where we have to go in government. There's a lot of government promises. If you do this, I'll do that, right? And we always try to find out who's gonna work for what. At the end of the day, I'm not promising anything. What I will say is I will work hard to bring solutions into our district.
Well, there was a few more things that I wanted to cover. Time's not going to allow. I wanted to talk about the environment. I wanted to talk about making Pasadena a more walkable bike, reduce carbon footprints, and some of our more environmental issues.
I'm guessing you were going to bring all that up because I've been riding around in the bike lately.
I've seen a few pictures of you on a bike, right? I'm going to give you a pass on it being an electric bike, but I see you out there.
Hey, it's a bike.
I see you out there. Before we do get out of here, Brandon, why are you the best candidate for District 2?
I think it's a great question. I would say, and I'm specifically saying, I'm the best candidate for District 3 because I've been doing this work before there was a title. I've been committed to District 3 before there was a title. I worked at Jackie Robinson Park. I worked at Jackie Robinson Center. I worked in District 3. I've served District 3 in many capacities. I've helped organizations and nonprofits and businesses in District 3 thrive before there was ever a title, before I ever decided to run for city council. And only thing I'm trying to do is expand that work that I've already been doing. And so when people are making their decisions, I ask that you choose somebody that has been doing the work, that's committed and invested into the work of District 3. I've seen the good times, I've seen the great times, I've seen the bad times. But I'm committed to the work, and so that's why I decided to run again.
How can people get in contact with you?
www.brandonforpasadena.com and brandonforpasadena@gmail.com.
You're watching The Conversation Live. The Conversation Live focuses on social justice, restorative justice, inclusion, and equality. Brandon, thank you so much for being here with me today. If you want to read more of my writing, make sure you check out my friends over at the LA Progressive. Until we have another opportunity to speak with you, as always, agape.